time for a discussion. Chris Hart, relationship expert, is with me in studio. Chris, you say that most couples break up in December over the holidays.
Well, not most couples. Most couples have a very happy Christmas. But
Yes.
the couples who are going to break up in any given year,
Okay.
most of them break up over Christmas, it's true.
How is that? Why?
Well, I think it's largely, bear in mind two things about Christmas. We have very high expectations. You know, we all look forward to Christmas. We think it's going to be wonderfully romantic. We think it's going to be fun with the kids, fun with the family, whatever, you know. We've got holidays planned, but there's a downside. We work too long, we get very tired, and then we start bickering. You know, we all the little things start coming out.
Okay.
And to be honest, there's also an effect. You imagine you're thinking of parting company with your delightful whatever it is, and it's October, November. Suddenly you don't want to disturb the plans, so you just hang on. So in a way, Christmas sweeps up the last quarter of the breakups.
Really?
Yeah.
But isn't it the time when everybody wants to be with somebody special, you know, with your family?
Yes.
There's also, at some point, there's going to be free time for everybody, long holidays, long weekends like the one coming up this weekend. So you want to spend that time with a special one. Maybe January is when you'd want to break up, because then you'll...
Well, that's what happens, you see. People don't actually break up at Christmas. They break up the day after Christmas. You get what I mean? They limp through Christmas.
They limp through Christmas.
Yeah, because you don't want to upset the family. You don't want to upset people. Frankly, people are a bit, you know, I don't want to be on my own either. Even so, better to be with somebody I don't really like than to be alone. Yes.
Okay, and then the divorce
starts in January.
In January.
Talk to the lawyers. They all
Really?
Yeah. It sounds awful, but they look forward to January.
Okay, so it's beginning a year with, you know, getting to a place where you feel like, okay, I've been in this bad relationship, I'm done, time to move on, filing for divorce, and yeah,
that's what happens.
that is very interesting.
It's very sad, I know, but I mean, in principle, people break up at any time of the year, don't they? But you see, Christmas is rather special. And for the two reasons I said, one is we don't actually want to be alone at Christmas, so we hang on.
You hang on.
But also it's very stressful. You'd be surprised the number of people who actually don't really enjoy Christmas. They're looking forward to it so much.
Yeah.
But they're broke. They've spent too much. They bought too many toys for the children, whatever, you know. They've travelled long journeys. You know, they're with people that, like great Uncle Fred, you know, who always causes a fight at Christmas. And so it goes on.
Okay, let's talk about it in general. Breakups, they happen. Maybe they're those lucky ones who have been in a relationship, the first one they ever got into, and they're still happily married. But for most people, they'll go through several of them. And for most as well, it's hurtful. I mean, you'll go through this period, you know, losing this loved person. And of course, there's the difference of whether you're the one who's broken up with somebody or you're the one who's been dumped. So let's begin with the person who decides, I want to end this relationship. Of course, it's something that has gotten them to that place. But also, even for them, there is some form of dealing and coping that is going to take place.
I think the starting point is that if you begin to realize that something's wrong with the relationship, there's a process you really ought to go through which will make it better for both of you. If you simply storm out one day, the chances are it's not going to work out very well. I mean, for example, people who do storm out often come back. And that's the classic problem of the person who's in, say, a violent relationship. We know lots of people, don't we, who are with someone who's beating them, and yet they don't leave, and we can't understand it. And the reason is because leaving is a process and not an event. If you don't go through the process, you don't leave. And you also leave the other person in a very bad state. So you have to start by thinking to yourself, why am I doing this? What am I going to do when I've done it? Where am I going to live? Do I need to get a new job? Who are going to be my friends? You know, where am I going to hang out? If you think through all that whole process, then by the time you get to leaving, it'll all be very clear in your mind. And you'll actually start by having some good conversations with your soon-to-be ex. You know.
I like that sound of soon-to-be ex.
Yeah, I mean, you know, breakups can be traumatic, but they can also be civilized. So if you're thinking about breaking up and you're putting it all clear in your mind, then you can get to the point where you talk to your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and you say, sorry, it's going to end, and you do it in a way where they're okay with it.
Where they're okay. I like that you say it's not an event, it's a process, because for very many people it's dramatic. It's a call or a text here, it's over, I'm done, and they go.
I know of hordes of times when there's been a huge blow up, and the injured party, let's say, an infidelity comes to light or something like that, and the injured party says, get out, get out, get out.
Clothes being out the window.
Yeah, a lot, bash the car. And of course, 4 weeks later, they're bitterly regretting it. But actually, they have probably caused the end of the marriage, which might well have survived and improved greatly.
Okay.
So if you are tempted to break up, even in dramatic circumstances, hold back. Just don't go there. You know what they say about decisions. If you're uncertain about something, hold back. And that's true about breakups. If there's any doubt at all in your mind, if it's anything but the most dramatic situation, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Just wait and think. Because then, in all probability, it'll be better. It will be better.
Yeah, because, usually the instinct, the immediate thought of what to do at that particular time is to lash out. Is to just let this person know what's on your mind.
Absolutely.
Give them a piece of your mind and walk.
The trouble is, it feels good.
It does feel good.
Hence all the horrible SMSs, Don't do any of that.
Okay.
Just
how the holding back, whilst you say is the best thing to do, is very difficult. It takes quite some strength, to be able to. You've just found out he's cheating. You've just seen that message.
Yes.
Or this woman has just come saying, "Hey, where's Bob?"
Yes.
Looking for him.
Yeah, but there's a very famous book. You must have heard of it, The Art of War, written 2,500 years ago and still in print.
Right.
It's full of absolute gems about how to come out ahead. And one of its gems is don't do anything rash.
Okay.
Don't ever lash out. Don't let the other person know that you're in turmoil. Just sit there as if it's all peaceful and tranquil. Work out in your head what you're going to do.
Yeah. And actually that is what would get this other person really feeling bad. It's like, a hot chuckle on their head if you're not very worked up as they'd imagine you'd be. And you just sit there saying, okay,
we'll deal with it. You just say, okay, well, let's talk about it tomorrow. I know that's a counsel of perfection, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, so ultimately, then the breakup will happen. Let's go back to this person who's initiated it. I've decided I want to end this relationship. So when you say important to think through it before.
Yes. For the person
to plan for the breakup.
Yes, for the person who's initiating it, things are much more straightforward once you've got past that point.
Okay.
If you have thought about it clearly, then to be honest, you've laid the groundwork for what you're going to be doing afterwards. You've perhaps found somewhere new to live. You've perhaps told one or two key people. You've made one or two new friends, dare I say it, and one way or another, your life just slips from one life to another.
Seamlessly-ish.
It's seamlessly-ish, yes, exactly.
Okay.
But it's clean for you because it was purposeful. And in fact, those people often feel a great sense of relief. Gosh, I've done it.
Yeah,
done. And they move into their new job, new house, whatever, and they just get on with it.
So let's talk about this person further. They've decided, they've gone through the whole process, new friends, new house to live if they need to move, and everything else has been put in place. But the question of the best way to break up with somebody.
Yeah.
If there is a best way.
Well, there is a best way, and the best way is to be very civilized about it. And to basically take the blame. Not to go in there.
That's it's not you, it's me conversation?
Basically, you go in there. What you want to do is leave the other person with some self-respect. So if you go charging in and say it's because you get drunk and all the rest of it, it probably is. But you say, no, I'm sorry, it's me. I've just changed. I don't want to be in this.
But isn't that condescending when you're here sitting and telling me, it's me? Then why are you breaking up with me? Deal with yourself if it's you.
But you see, the thing is this. If I say it's you, then you're going to start promising me all sorts of things. I'll change. I'll be different. We're going to get into a huge debate. And before I know it, I've backed down. I don't want to go there, you see. I want to say, I'm sorry, I've made my mind up. I can't change my mind. I've been thinking about this for months. I've got my new flat, I've got my new job, I'm moving to Mombasa tomorrow.
I'm done. Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And of course, how you do it depends on how you expect your newly ex-person to react. I mean, if it's going to be very civilized, you can literally do it at 9 o'clock in the morning in the marital home. But a lot of people, it can be very, very traumatic. So for a lot of people, it's best to go and have a cup of coffee somewhere. You know, it sounds awful when you do it like that, but doing things in a public place, they're not quite so likely to hit you.
And for a relationship, of course, easier than a marriage. So take us through for a marriage. When you're getting to the point where you want to file for divorce, you think and feel this is not working, you want to move on.
In the case of a marriage, of course, things can be very complex because there may be children, there may be shared financial arrangements. So part of your thinking through preparation, I'm afraid, is going to include seeing a lawyer, talking to the accountant, whatever it takes to start thinking through how you're going to process all this thing. Now, in the case of a marriage, though, you really have to do two things at once. You have to make all those preparations. You're convinced in your mind there's going to be a breakup, but you must also do your level best to try and save the marriage. There are a lot of reasons why marriages should be saved. So you must have exhausted them all by the time you get to breakup day. So your ex-to-be has to have the sensation that you have been trying. So you should be talking about all the key issues, you should be going to a counsellor if necessary. Whatever it takes, you try and do it. So that by the time you get to breakup day, you're saying, and I've tried, I have really tried, look at what I've done.
Okay, let's, I mean, I spoke to somebody a while back and they were telling me that they had this girlfriend and she kept breaking up, then coming back and saying it's over. She goes a week, 2 weeks, a month, comes back. And the third or fourth time she did that, when she came back, he was like, no, I'm done, I'm tired of this. So this kind of a person who will break up, then come back and say, okay, you know what, I'll just forgive you and things will continue. They're the people who have not thought through this, you would say, exactly ahead of
they are treating it as an event. You know, they're being sparked by something that happened that day and they're just doing it. But over the next 24, 48 hours, it all collapses. So if you intend to break up, you have to go through the process, and it should take weeks. Okay, if you've only known somebody for 3 days, you could make up your mind in 10 minutes. But you know, if you've been in a relationship for any length of time and there's any depth there at all, you do need to think things through for quite a reasonable length of time. The other thing it's worth saying about trying your best to save the relationship in parallel with preparing to break up is that the other person will then gradually realize that it's coming. It's not nice to break up with somebody on a day when they literally don't know it's going to happen.
Okay, give us an example.
That is pretty evil. Well, it can happen, you know. I mean, okay, if I've just done something wicked and I go home and my wife tells me she's caught me, I know in my mind there's a good chance we'll break up. But if I wake up one morning and it's a lovely sunny morning and she starts talking to me about divorce, I'm going to be pretty devastated. It would be better if, over the previous few weeks, I've got an inkling of what's coming. And if, for example, things are serious and you're talking to a counsellor, a good counsellor will say, you know, this relationship is ending. And if you want to save it, you know, things have got to be done on a much higher key. You've got to try much harder.
All right. So we've talked a bit about the person initiating the breakup, the one who decides. I guess it's more difficult for the person being thrown out, dumped.
It can be truly devastating. I mean, if it really does come out of the blue and you're not expecting it, and it often does, you'd be amazed the number of couples in which one is quite oblivious that the other one is in quite a lot of distress. So suddenly for that person, their world is collapsing. Now, on the assumption that that's what happens, that it does end up as a breakup, then it's very like a death in the family. You know, you are thrown into exactly the same processes as if somebody's died. And so you have to go through a grieving process, which is almost identical, in fact. And it lasts about the same length of time, and it has all the same emotions, and it's quite devastating. And the key for that person is to understand what they're going through and to accept what they're going through and to deal with it.
And many people, after it happens, after you've been told, okay, you know what, I can't do this, it's not working, I want out, they will try to convince this other person, no, as you'd mentioned, I'll change. I know it's me, even if this person will be keen to say, yeah, I've gotten to a point in my life, I feel I need something different. They'll say, I'll do this. They'll always try to address the issues, if any, raised during that breakup.
Yes.
Is that a smart way to still, at that point, try and resolve?
Whether it's smart or not, I think it's pretty much inevitable.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons why I say, if you're the one initiating the breakup, the right thing to do is to work on the relationship during your preparation, so that you don't come to the point where they say, hey, this is a big surprise, we should be doing this. You want them to realize, actually, we've been working like crazy on this relationship for 6 months, and it clearly isn't working. So they are much closer to accepting the inevitable then.
Okay. So after the breakup, you have been told it's over and done with. What is the next couple of days? How should they look like for the one who's been left?
Well, they're pretty horrible as a rule. I mean, there you are, suddenly sitting in a living room all by yourself, and the children and the wife have left. That is really foul. And the most important thing you can do is to get some family support. Go home. Go and see your parents, go and talk to someone in the family that you get along with really well, and talk about it. And then, as fast as you can, continue with the routine. Go to work. Tell somebody at work. Try and do your job. Try and do the things at the same times each day that you normally did, so that your brain at least is on autopilot. But as much as possible, be with people who will be okay with you talking about it.
Because you need to talk about it.
You need to talk about it a lot.
Okay.
The more you can talk about it. I know it sounds as if you're going to be the most boring person ever. Yeah, exactly. But you need to do it. You keep telling the story again and again and again, and it slowly sorts itself out in your mind.
It becomes reality. It settles down. It sinks in, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, because you know what the stages of grieving are. People start off in denial. This isn't really happening. She'll come back.
He didn't dump me.
He didn't really dump me.
Yeah.
And then you go through a sort of, you go angry. You start bargaining. With yourself. If only I had. What if I had done this? What if I ring them and say this? And that's pretty vile. You go through these highs and lows during that for days, weeks sometimes. And then very slowly you begin to slip into your new routine, and you begin to accept, and you begin to start building your new life.
But there are those who get stuck in the denial, where if they used to hang out at the particular club or place, they will still go there, hoping to see them, and they think that if he sees or she sees him, whoever, that it will, change their mind or make them realize they're missing out.
I mean, to be honest, it's hard to persuade people not to do things like that. But very slowly, as people begin to say, okay, this is real, I must deal with it. And, it is one of the signs of a mature individual that they do face up to reality. So when you realize that you are on your own, and you start to think, what do I do to make this more bearable? And as you start to do those things, it does become more bearable. I mean, some of them sound hilarious. You put away the photographs. You take the CD, her CD, out of the DVD player and things like that, and you stop going to those restaurants and bars, and you shop somewhere else. You build yourself a life where you're back to being an independent person, and you're not constantly being reminded of them. Do you see what I mean?
What about those who want to return some of the things that had been given by their boyfriend's fiance?
That whole process is, of course, quite traumatic. In the worst case, the marriage, of course, there's going to be a huge split up of stuff. People end up fighting over the dog and everything. You wouldn't believe it, some of the things that go on in the law courts. People get very emotionally attached to little pieces of irrelevant furniture, and all of that gets very traumatic. And I think you just have to accept that it's all going to be like that.
Okay. Wow. Another big one, Chris, is after the breakup, the relationship is out and done with. After that, do you still have communication? Do you still have a friendship? There are those of the school of thought, never. An ex is an ex, no communication, no talking to them. It's funny. And then there are those who will insist, he's an ex, but they're still friends.
There are degrees of this, of course. I mean, I literally might move to Kuala Lumpur tomorrow and never see you again.
Yeah.
So it does happen that way. But the reality is that when you have been in an intimate relationship with someone, you never forget them. They are part of you in a way that you just don't achieve in any other part of your life, isn't it? So imagining that you're going to completely cut them out of your life is pretty unrealistic. And then as you climb up the relationship scale, by the time you're running a business together, you've got 3 children, and so on, it's impossible not to have contact.
Okay.
You know, I mean, if we're talking about a 10-year marriage with 2 8-year-old children,
it's impossible.
It's impossible.
But if you're talking about 2 years relationship dating,
dating relationships are easier, but you're still going to meet. You know, the new girlfriend always says, "Don't let me catch you talking to the ex." But in practice, you can't do that. You know, you are going to meet in the street, in the supermarket.
Yeah.
You are going to exchange pleasantries, if nothing else. You're going to be civilized, I hope.
Yes.
It's impossible not to have conversations with exes.
Okay. So it's important not to have conversations because as you take us through the process and you say it's like death, unfortunately. You're losing this person. They're leaving, no longer in your life. So you're going through this process. But there's also a big thing of concern, and is as you're talking to people, you know, after how long do you have to go through this mourning period, and when then are you ready to get into another relationship? How much time do you give yourself?
Right. If the relationship was very significant, more than just, you know, a casual college romance sort of thing, then it's going to take 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Somewhere between 1 and 3 years, depending on the complexities of everything. You know, if it was a really serious marriage for 20 years, then it'll be nearer 3 than 2. But you will actually start a new life well before that. It's just that the issues will still be coming up and you'll still be dealing with them for 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
So at some point you are going to meet someone new, and the statistics on it are that people meet someone after about 6 to 8 months. Before that they're just a bit too unstable, really. But round about that time they may actually have started to think, oh gosh, I'd like to, but most people don't.
Yeah.
But it's a statistic. There are people who do. The majority start to find somebody about that time. Before that, the relationships, when they do form, are very, very unstable.
Yeah, because like a rebound.
Absolutely, and you've got to be very careful, because the chances are you've started with somebody very unsuitable. And for you, I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying they're not right for you.
For you.
And inevitably there's going to be another great smash, and you don't want to go there. So the right thing to do is to just enjoy pleasant social relationships with as many friends as you can.
Yeah.
And somewhere after about 6 to 8 months, you'll suddenly discover that one of them is becoming significant.
Yeah. Okay, because the question would be how to deal with that loneliness, because you've had this person and have been in this relationship, steady one, for a lengthy period of time. They're no longer there, and then there's all this time you were used to having Sundays with this person or whatever, date nights. So to keep a social life active with other people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of prevention is better than cure here, in that if you've maintained good relationships with your family and good relationships with your work colleagues, and you have some friends at various sort of levels, then that transition is going to be much easier. The problem is that in a lot of cases people do get very insular in a marriage, but for example they do all their things with their spouse and their family, and so the breakup is more difficult.
And there are those who will break up, and are points where they say, I'm never doing it again. I'm never. Those men or those women, never.
I think almost everybody says that at some point. But
when they're still hurting.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, at some point you really do feel sore about the whole thing.
But there are those who get stuck and remain there months later. They still don't want anything.
A lot of people get stuck at almost every stage. You know, some people get stuck in denial. There's been some wonderful fictional characters, you know, characters in novels who have been the whole point of the novel is they get stuck in the denial phase, and they're still desperately trying to make the relationship start again. Some people get stuck in the anger phase. Some people get stuck in the bargaining phase, and every time they meet their ex for years and years and years, they start the what if conversation. Some people grieve too heavily. They literally are devastated. They go into quite deep depressions and stay there for a very long time. Now, anybody who's getting stuck really does need professional help. And the key really here is the family. The family should monitor somebody who is going through a process like this. And if they see them getting stuck, because the chances are they won't recognize it themselves, then they need to quietly start helping them to either deal with it or to get some help.
Okay. And the serial breakup people, they're constantly, 3 months, a year, and it's over. I mean, constantly, when I see you next, I'm like, so still with so? I'm like, who?
There's a number of reasons for this.
Yeah.
In young people, it's often simply a stage you go through. You meet up with a lovely girl, you start a relationship, and you can see that she's being dead serious, but you're not ready. So after 6 months, it stops, and you do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Lots of young men do that. Lots of young women do it. Lots of professional women do it. Then there are other reasons why people get into serial relationships, and some of them are quite difficult to deal with. Like, for example, as I'm growing up in my family, adolescence, first loves, all these things build up into a picture in my mind of the sort of person I find attractive. And psychologists call it a template. And I go out looking for my template. And I find it, and I marry, and then it breaks up. What do I do when I go out again? I go looking for the same template. So I go looking for the person with the same attributes as my first love. Wow. Clearly I'm going to go through the same process again. So if I go out looking for somebody who's got the markers for violence, then I'll have 3 violent relationships. I seriously, I know women who've been married 3 times to violent men. You'd think, logically, you think they're not going to do this. First time, you know all the signs. But they don't realize it's happening, you see.
Wow.
You can picture it, can't you? If your first love is the captain of the rugby team, then maybe you go out every time. And maybe he's a bit, likes the drink. And so, of course, each time you do the same thing again.
Okay. For the person who's also been left all the time, is it time to then sometimes just sit back and decide, before I get into another relationship, I've been dumped once, twice, thrice, maybe I need a whole break to evaluate something wrong here with me?
Yeah, I think the break bit is not perhaps the right way of putting it, but the concept you're talking about is absolutely spot on. If you are in either side of a breakup, whether you're the breakee or the break-or, you should actually do a little bit of work on yourself before you get going again. You should spend a bit of time thinking, why did this happen? What went wrong? It's not a blame game. Actually, it's a forgiveness game. You're forgiving yourself, you're forgiving the other person. You're being rational about why it happened. And you're saying to yourself, how do I avoid doing this again? What are the things I should be doing? Primarily about yourself. To make sure that next time I don't do this again. For example, if the core reason for your breakup was that you're a workaholic, you should recognize that and next time give more time to the relationship. And so on. Whatever it is, you need to know what it was. And it's important not to simply say, I married a slob, and therefore it's not my fault and I don't have to do anything. The truth is, you do need to do something. Even if you're the one who's breaking up.
All right, and this perhaps will take us to the phases and what you were talking about, but there are those who then will end up stalking their ex, constantly, always wanting to, what are they up to? They're still tied and they cannot believe it is gone. I mean, that is serious when it gets to the level of stalking.
When you get up to the point of harassment and stalking and things like that, you are close to talking about mental illness. I mean, this is not normal behavior. And if you look at the typical stalkers and what have you, you usually find that the rest of their life is a terrible mess. And you find personality disorders and all sorts of things. So in a way, if you want to avoid getting into a situation of being stalked, one of the things you need to do as you start your relationship is to say, am I with somebody with a personality disorder? You don't want to marry somebody with a personality disorder, believe me. So early stages of a relationship, think about this person and watch their behaviors like a hawk. And if you see something weird, then sooner or later the relationship will end. And when it ends, you might end up in that sort of situation. So don't go there.
Yes, because it's one of the things, especially I realize in Kenya, we do not talk much about the personality disorders, the mental illness, because we only think of the really people who are deeply affected, but they're usually the mild cases, but they're there. And you say important to monitor and just to watch for some of those, even obsessively people when in a relationship and they're just every move. You'll hear of cases of that even when a man speaks to his sisters, some women will have issues because like, why, that kind of jealousy that's really unexplainable.
Yes. Yeah. You're quite right. And you're quite right with what you said first. We don't talk about these things very much.
We don't.
People are almost completely ignorant about personality disorders, for example, but they're well recognized, and to be truthful, we see a lot of them every single day of our lives, and we think, that guy's a bit, and yet we don't actually then connect the dots and think, I ought to know a bit more about these sorts of things, and I ought to avoid getting involved with them. The complexity of it is, though, that some of them are so difficult that there's no danger of marrying them because they just don't socialize, so you're not going to marry them. But some of them are very slick operators. Like, for example, dare I say this on air, a good proportion of the CEOs in this country will have narcissistic personality disorder because the two things go together. And of course the ladies love CEOs for all the right reasons, and you can see what's coming, can't you? So some of these personality disorders make people very effective. They make them very charming, but deep underneath there are some really serious
actually is a problem. We cannot end this discussion, Chris, without touching on if somebody is watching this right now and their relationship undergoing several issues, and there's probably somebody considering or thinking of a breakup. I mean, for some really it's a good thing. Breakups are not always bad things. Some it's really good that perhaps it ends because of the harm and danger it could pose to the person, but there's also effort or work that can be put in to save a relationship. So as we wind up, take us through that in fact for some people there are situations where it's good to end a relationship.
Yes,
and then in others you can work on it.
The obvious ones you should think seriously about ending are the ones where there's real violence, real abuse, whether it's verbal or otherwise. If you genuinely feel really bad in the relationship for whatever reason, then you must seriously think about ending it. And the moment that thought has crossed your mind, you must do that double thing I was talking about of simultaneously working on the relationship and preparing to leave. In the worst case of, say, violence, you should also have a bug out plan. You should actually think to yourself, what happens if I one day think, gosh, I might die tonight? You've got to be able to do something. So you have to prepare a little bag with your papers and keys and a bit of money, and you've got to think of a place where you could go that night with the kids or whatever. So that you could literally walk out if necessary.
Okay.
But the key is you start seriously thinking about it.
As you said that, I've remembered the incident, Jennifer Hudson, I don't know if you had the story, renowned musician from the States, and her mother, her brother, and her nephew were killed by husband to her sister, her brother-in-law. And what had happened is that in the relationship, he kept saying, if you ever leave me, I will kill you and I will kill your family. And that is precisely what happened. And she said later in an interview, she said she never actually thought it would happen. And so for people and for couples where things are really not working out, and especially such a situation when somebody tells you, if you leave me, when you want to leave them, what kind of measures do you take to mitigate?
Well, first of all, when people say things like that, the threats of violence, the threats of suicide, you should take them seriously. Particularly if they're uttered by young, rather disorganized males. If they're those sorts of people, then they're probably real. And the right thing to do is to go and get a bit of professional advice. Because go and talk to somebody who's seen this all before, and for an hour of your time you will be able to make a decision as to whether this is just an imaginary thing or something that you should take really seriously. But in general you should take it seriously.
You should, I think, very important.
Again, prevention is better than cure. When you first met this person, these things were there. These personality traits, these personality disorders were there, and you should be watching for them like a hawk. I often say that the way to date nowadays is in reverse. You spend your first few dates thinking of reasons to end the relationship. And you watch the guy, how does he treat the waiters, and
Yes.
da-da-da. And if you see something that's a bit weird, there are some lovely
instances.
Sorry?
Because it's easier to end it early.
Not just easier. You just stop taking the calls.
Yeah.
It's also it saves you wasting an awful lot of time. Why get emotionally involved with somebody who's got a raging personality disorder?
Yeah. So instead of getting caught up in the, he's so sweet, he sent me flowers, he calls me after every half hour, focus on, he did not sleep
what you should be
at
doing
home.
is you should be looking at the girl's whole life and saying, is this guy leading a good, honest, sensible life? Is he nice to his mother? Is he kind to the cat? Is he opening the door for me? No, seriously, if people are being nice to the things like that in their lives, the chances are...
If they kick the cats, they might kick you. All right, Chris, we must end it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Coping with breakups this morning. Watch out for that. Yeah, if he's kicking around the cat, one day you might be that cat that is pink.